embracing pressure for transformation and success. So growing up, me and my family actually had a joke about how poor we was. So my mom used to always tell us that when people ask how poor you are, don't tell them that you're poor, tell them that you're po. And she said that because we simply couldn't afford the extra O and the R. All right, so maybe that was cheesy, maybe it was funny, I don't know. But my parents, man, they really wanted to stress the fact that, hey, growing up, we really didn't have much. And here's the thing, for a long time as a kid, and I think for most people, if they ever grew up in poverty, they don't realize it. They don't realize it until they go to their friend's house or they see, kids at school and they're having conversations about how they just got back on vacation. Or even for me, this happened later in my years. Like I was in college, so I was in my 20s. I remember hearing a friend talk to me about having a beach house. And for some reason, it just didn't communicate to me that someone can have two houses, that someone can have their regular house that they live at, but then have this other house that they only visit during the summer. Like that totally blew my mind. And that's kind of how it is when you're growing up in tough situations like that. One thing that I will say that my upbringing did teach me was that work ethic is something that can get you through tough times. When you're growing up in that type of way, if you will, like you just have to work extra hard for sometimes the most basic things. I'll give you an example. Growing up, there are certain things that we couldn't afford at times. One of those things being a necessity, like water. I remember one time we went maybe 2-3 months without having running water, and it may have been longer. And what we would have to do every single night was that we would have to go to this local church that had this spring where water was just always coming out, and people would line up and they'll fill their buckets up. But when me and my family got there, man, we had a trunk full of buckets. We actually filled the whole car, just enough for 2 people to get into the 2 front seats. So when we got there, we would literally be there for hours just filling up buckets of water. And then we would have to take those jugs of water back home, and we would shower with it, cook with it. We would use the bathroom with it, obviously, like we did everything with it. And that was really, really tough. But what I will say is that those tough times actually showed me the value of $1. Now, I do want to say this. When you go through something like that, if you're not careful, it would teach you to have a scarcity mindset, someone that's very tight with their money. Now, I know the value of money, yes, but I also know the value of investing that money into something, whether it's a vehicle like stocks, real estate, my own personal development, which I just did an episode on, like whatever the case it may be. I have to trust that money would come back to me like a boomerang, but it will come back even more. That's the power of being able to go through tough times. That's the power of investing as well. So I give you this story because even though I've gone through a tough time, even though me and my family experienced financial pressures, it actually helped to transform something within me. It gave me a work ethic, and it also taught me the value of $1. Now, what I'm going to do in this podcast episode is I'm going to go over the reasons why pressure is so vital when it comes to your transformations and your success. Now, if you're listening to this podcast this far, you obviously made it through the first 3 minutes or so, and that tells me that you're bought in. And because you're bought in, I need you to subscribe to this podcast. By subscribing to this podcast, it'll help you with all the future transformations that you're looking for, all the future hurdles that you're going to need to overcome. And what I always tell my guys that subscribe to my channel to do is actually comment below topics that you would love for me to talk about, and I will personally do a podcast on that topic. So it's a win-win for you. You can get a personalized episode just for yourself. So make sure you comment. You can also send me a direct email. So my email, and this is the first time I've ever given it, but my email is philipwells@theplayerscoach.net. If you do that, I promise I'll return your email. So with that being said, let's get to point number 1. So the first reason why we should embrace pressure and how it can help us with our transformations and our success actually comes from a story that I want to tell you guys about. And it's more so like something that I know you've experienced. So have you ever experienced having a red eye flight? So if you don't know what a red eye flight is, it's you taking a flight when your eyes are red. So either early in the morning or late at night. Here in South Florida, we have 2 major airports, Fort Lauderdale Airport and Miami Airport. And both of these airports are constantly running. And sometimes if I'm pressured, I would take a flight that's at maybe 6 a.m. Now, if you know anything about flights, if your flight is at 6 a.m., what does that mean? That means you got to be at the airport by at least 4 a.m. Well, to get to the airport by 4 a.m., I probably got to get up by 3 a.m. so that I can get showered, get dressed, get in an Uber, and then get to the airport. So I'm getting up at 3 a.m. in order to make this red-eye flight. And here's the thing, guys. I've done that several times, and I know you have too. And I always tell people, isn't it ironic that we can get up early for something like a flight, but yet we can't get up early to go to the gym, to work on a goal that we have, or anything like that? So what this leads me to is point number 1, which is pressure is the opportunity to see what we're actually made of. That's the first point that I want to make, and that's why pressure is so important. When you put yourself in high pressure situations, it really gives you the chance, and I can make the argument that it is the only opportunity that you get to actually see what you're truly made of, to see what you've been doing these past few years. So for some people, this pressure may come in the form of a test that they have to take. Me, I've worked with a lot of medical doctors, a lot of medical students, doctors. They've come to me because they're in med school and they're struggling with a lot of pressure. They're struggling with a lot of stress. And now they have their boards that they need to take. Same thing has happened with real estate agents that I've worked with, engineers, contractors, anybody that's in some type of profession that they have to get a license for and they're struggling, they've met with me. And when they take this license, it gives them a chance to see what they've been doing for the past 3, 4, or even 5 years. So that's the only opportunity that you get for that. I'll still give you another story. There's been times where I've been in college and I've gotten better, but I've been in college and I've just simply let all my assignments go. Like I haven't written down or done any of my assignments. In other words, I was procrastinating on them. And I remember there was a week, it was sometime in November, so it was almost the end of the year, that I had not 1, not 2, but 3 professors say, hey guys, don't forget you have that 8-page paper due in about 2 weeks. And I'm sitting there like, yo, where did this come from? And just as a side note, guys, my freshman year was absolutely horrible. I had a 2.1 GPA and I had to quit the track team because I was doing that bad in school. So I remember looking like, yo, like how did I let 3 8-page papers stack up on me like this and I didn't even know? So I'm sitting there like, geez, I gotta do something. And I remember one night, and actually it was 2 nights, I pulled an all-nighter. That means I simply stayed up all night working on these projects, working on these papers. And that was something that I've never done before. And for a lot of people that's been to college, the first time you probably pulled an all-nighter was probably when you were in college, when you was forced to study for an exam or study for some test or finish some paper that you were struggling to do, that you were procrastinating on doing. This is when we were able to see that, we actually have the power to rise whenever the time is called upon us. And that's what pressure does. Pressure will actually push you to show up when you need to show up, thus guaranteeing your success. So what I want you guys to start seeing as, what I want you guys to start seeing as tests or even challenges, I want you to see those things as actually opportunities. That's one of the biggest things that I used to see people mistake. They will see something as a challenge and see it as something hard, something that's impossible, something that they should avoid. But in actuality, every challenge that you're facing is actually an opportunity to get better. So I want you to treat it as such. And also, this is simply why teachers have tests. It is literally to test your knowledge and that pressure, right? And here's the thing, like when you're in college, school, grade school, whatever it is, your tests typically outweigh your homework assignments and all that other stuff, right? So they wanted to really push you and put pressure on you to see what you're made of, what you learned throughout the course of that year. So again, point number 1, the same reason why you're able to get up for those 5 a.m. flights or those 6 a.m. flights or pulling all-nighter because you forgot a project that's due. The reason why is because pressure is the opportunity to see what we're made of. When you're pressured, it's going to push you. So don't avoid that pressure. All right, point number 2 as to why pressure is important for your success and your transformation is that simply pressure terrifies your competition, which makes your success easier to accomplish. Now, for me, it took me a long time to get this one. It took me a long time to really understand what pressure meant in this sense. Because when I saw something that was hard, I would think, man, I should probably just find something easier to do. But guess what? 99% of people that are going through that same pressured route, they're thinking the same thing and they're doing the same thing. So in other words, 99% of the people are also choosing the easy route. You know, what's funny is I have a client who's a wholesaler, right? I have a few clients that are in the real estate game and they are all at different stages. But what's interesting is that when they come across something that's hard, they'll naturally tell me, hey, coach, it's tough. I'm thinking about maybe, giving up on this, right? Things like that. And what I tell them is that if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. If your goal is to make $1 million, if your goal is to retire early, to have financial freedom, trust me when I say it's going to be a little difficult. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. It's the reason why you have people that are in the top 1%. It's because they're doing things that the other 99% is just simply not going to do. It's very interesting. I have a few people that's also in sales, and it's the same thing with them. Whenever they find themselves getting rejected or just simply not having the outcomes that they're looking for, they start to get down. And I would tell you, getting down is actually okay. Quitting is not okay. So what I want them to do and what I tell them to do is I need them to focus on just getting one more call, making one more action towards this goal. I just need them to push themselves just a little bit more, because what they're going to see is that when they've won, when they've accomplished that goal, they'll see that, hey, all that stuff that I went through was actually worth it. But if you quit before you get the outcome, what you're going to do is you're going to confirm a negative belief that you had at the beginning, which was, I wasn't good enough. Or something even worse, this is a scam. So if you're in wholesaling, which I have a client that's doing, or if you're selling some type of product, it can be, insurance or what have you, or selling cars or selling courses, if you will, there's a chance that you're taking a course or you join a membership from someone that has done it or someone that has proclaimed that they've done it. And what may happen is that because you quit, it may confirm that this course, this mentorship program, or being coached is a scam, and that will stop you from getting future coaching or purchasing future classes that could actually help you on the next goal that you're going to set for yourself. So that's the biggest fear that I have when people quit, is that it confirms a negative belief, and now it's going to be even harder to overcome that belief on top of all the other negative beliefs that they've already had. So it's important for you to stay on the path that you chose. And believe me when I say, when you do that, you'll see that the competition will eliminate itself. When it does that, you'll look up and see that it's actually easier than you originally thought, okay? So with that being said, again, point number 2, pressure terrifies your competition, which is why your success will be easier to obtain. Oh, and let me mention this. So this just popped into my mind. You know what's actually interesting about podcasts? I did a podcast about this actually, about maybe like 2 months ago. But what's interesting about podcasts is that in order to be in the top 1% of all podcasts, you only need to make 21 episodes. Now, when someone asks you, what does it take to be in the top 1% of podcasts, or how many podcasts do you need to make in order to be in the top 1%, you may think, okay, I need to come up with maybe 100 or 1,000 or maybe 2,000. Like, that's probably what your mind is telling you. But believe it or not, there's statistics, there's stats that say if you make it past episode 21, you are officially in the top 1%. And what that tells me is that it's not just podcasts, but it's so many other areas of people's lives, of your life, where people just simply can't stay with things. They can't stick with it. They're not disciplined enough. And what it is that they will give up early, really quickly, early in their journey. So therefore, if you're willing to be a little bit more consistent, you will outpace the people that are in your competition. So just keep going, guys. Trust me, you'll be rewarded down the line. All right, main point number 3, and this is by far my favorite. I should have mentioned this earlier in the podcast, actually. But before I give point number 3, I always like to tell you guys, make sure you subscribe to this channel. I mean, I got to admit, I give my all in these podcasts. I read, I research, I do a lot to make sure that I'm giving you guys high quality information in these podcasts. So go ahead and make sure that you subscribe to it. So with that being said, main point number 3 as to why you should be embracing pressure for success and transformations is because it will show your loved ones what is possible. You know, I have a son and his name is Champion, right? Like, you know, and every time I tell people his name, they're like, whoa, like his name is really Champion. And I'm like, yeah. And it kind of goes without saying why we called him that, right? We want him to see himself as a champion. We want him to feel and be a champion. But something that not a lot of people know is his middle name. So me and his wife, or me and my wife, I remember we were in the hospital, and it was probably maybe 2 or 3 days before he was actually due. We were like, yo, we haven't come up with the middle name. And we were like, yeah, you're right. So we pull out our phones, we started searching. And one thing that we wanted his middle name to be is we wanted it to represent his Nigerian roots, because my wife is Nigerian. So I remember we went Googling and we were coming across all these Nigerian names and things like that. And off to the side, it would actually show us the meanings of his name. And so I remember we're searching. And then I came across his middle name, and it kind of just stuck out to me, if you will. So my son's name is Champion Azuka Wells. And what Azuka means is that it means confidence. That is literally what his middle name means. So when you put it all together, what we want him to be is a confident champion. That is exactly who we want him to be. And in order for him to be a confident champion, I, as his father, need to model what does a confident champion look like. And a confident champion is someone that is embracing pressure. They're doing all the hard stuff that other people aren't willing to do. What's funny is I tell people, man, what's hard? Getting up at 5 a.m. and going to a hotel to get showered because you don't have running water. That's hard. Or going and picking up water at midnight and then having to be up early the next day, right, to use that water because you don't have water in your own house. Like, that's hard, right? Or even my parents, they tell me this story all the time, but they tell me the story of how they would go into the fields, right? So the cotton fields in rural South Carolina. And in a day, they would pick 100 pounds of cotton. And during that time, money was different. So they got paid 2 cents per pound. So they would work all day picking up 100 pounds of cotton for only $2. That is hard. But hearing that story from my parents, it actually inspires me not to be afraid of hard work. And by me telling my son all the things that I've gone through and even modeling these things, it shows him that hard work and pressure isn't something to avoid, but actually something to embrace. And I can't think of any better gift that I can give my son other than showing him that he should embrace pressure and how it would transform his life. So that is the ultimate reason why you should be embracing pressure. It's because it will inspire the people that you love. It will show them what they can do when they push themselves, when they test themselves. It's ironic. You have these families here in America, but also in other parts of the world, where one person made a decision to change the lineage of that entire family. And I'll give you a few names. So the first thing that comes to my mind is the Rockefellers, right? Like the Rockefellers, as you know, super, super rich, right? Super multi-billions, right? Another name that comes to my mind is the Walton family. So if you don't know who the Walton family is, they're the people that own Walmart, right? So again, multi-billions, right? Even the Bus family, so the owner of the Lakers, right? Like that family has passed down ownership from the dad. I believe his name was Jim Bus. Then it went to his son, and then I think they fired his son and gave it to Jeannie Buss, who is now running that organization, so the Los Angeles Lakers, right? And then obviously you have other families like Jay-Z and his family, right? The Kardashians, which is a great example. So all these things happen, and the Kardashians was actually started by Rob Kardashian. It wasn't by Kim K and the sex tape, right? But Rob Kardashian was a very esteemed lawyer during his day. He actually represented, or was one of the lawyers that represented O.J. Mayo. So what I'm trying to say is that if you decide to be that one person that's going to embrace pressure, you will change the entire lineage of your family. So generations. And I can't think of a better way to leave a legacy. So with that being said, we're going to summarize these main points as to why it's important to embrace pressure for success and for transformations. So the first point that I made is that pressure is an opportunity to see what you're made of, okay? That's why we get up early and we're able to make it to those 5 a.m. flights. The second one, pressure actually terrifies your competition, which makes success easier, and I can even say likely, for you to obtain. All right. So pressure terrifies your competition, which makes it easier for you to be successful. And then point number 3 is that pressure will actually show your loved ones what is possible. Okay. It will show your loved ones what is possible. So with that being said, my name is Coach Wells. Appreciate you checking out this website, or rather this podcast. I'm a licensed therapist, and I'll see you later.